Karen threw a pool party right in my backyard, banned me from entering, and said I wasn't on the guest list. I didn't argue. I just slightly turned a valve. If there's one thing I've learned after 8 years of dealing with HOA run neighborhoods, it's this. Suburban peace only lasts until a Karen shows up. And I'm not joking. That afternoon was everything I had hoped for on a weekend getaway. A quiet pool, an ice-cold lemonade, and the flamingo floaty I just bought last week. I had just stepped out the back door, sunglasses on, floating in, one hand, lemonade in the other, when, "Excuse me?" A shrill female voice struck my eardrums like I'd just stepped on a live runway at an international airport. I froze. Right next to my pool, in my own backyard, stood a complete stranger. Wide-brimmed hat, oversized sunglasses, clutching a clipboard like she was about to strut down the Met Gala red carpet. Behind her were about 20 people, all wearing Hawaiian shirts, sipping punch, and posing for pictures in front of a banner that read, "Welcome to Cheryl's Summer Splash Bash." Wait, Cheryl who? And what party? In my backyard? I squinted again, half hoping I'd stepped into a parallel universe. But no, there was the tree I planted last year, the lounge chair I set up by the pool corner, and the pool that belongs to me. I spoke up, trying to stay polite, despite the rage boiling inside. "Maybe you're mistaken. I live here. This is my house." The woman, now I finally knew her name was Cheryl, pursed her lips as if I had just spilled fish sauce on her. "Chanel bag." "That's not important," she said. "The HOA booked this yard for today's event. You weren't on the RSVP list. Your presence is making the guests uncomfortable." I was speechless. Trying my best not to dump the lemonade over her head, I calmly asked, "You're saying I need to leave my own home?" Cheryl didn't blink. She even raised her clipboard like it came with a law attached. "Yes. According to HOA Regulation 47B, shared amenities may be used for community building events." I nearly laughed. "What shared amenities? This is a private yard, a private pool. You're drinking a punch on the patio table I bought last week." She didn't flinch. Instead, Cheryl flipped to a laminated sheet and read aloud like she was campaigning for city council. "That's up for interpretation. The spirit of the HOA is inclusivity. If everyone draws borders, how can we build community?" I stood still, not because I didn't know she was talking nonsense, but because I couldn't believe a complete stranger could lay claim to someone else's backyard without even blushing. I turned and walked back into the house, almost stepping on my chubby. Cat opened a drawer and pulled out the land ownership document, something I'd guarded like treasure since I moved in. Fine. If Cheryl liked rules, I'd let her redefine private property. I returned to the yard and handed her the paperwork. "This is the parcel map. The yellow line marks the property boundary. This is a private residence, and this land is not under the HOA's jurisdiction. Your event is unauthorized." Cheryl didn't flinch. "You should email the HOA board instead of disrupting the event. It's just a small misunderstanding." A small misunderstanding? She had a banner, a DJ, guests, and hired security. If this was a small misunderstanding, then I guess the last time someone broke into my house was just a case of mixed-up addresses. I was about to retort, but then yacht rock music blasted from the speakers, drowning out all rational thought. I heard someone say, "Great party," and ask how I knew Cheryl. I pointed to the pool. "I own that pool." He fell silent. If you ever thought that people who love giving orders would stop once they're exposed, you clearly haven't met Cheryl. After I confirmed that this was my house, my pool, my patio furniture, and that Cheryl and her 30 Hawaiian-shirted guests were blatantly trespassing, I naively believed the party would fizzle out in shame. I had severely underestimated the self-produced, self-directed dramatic capabilities of an HOA Karen. Cheryl didn't back down. No apology. Not even a blush. She flicked her clipboard like she was flipping through a rehearsal script and looked at me with the kind of pity one reserves for a child who just stepped onto the stage mid-performance. "You shouldn't embarrass yourself like this in front of the guests," Cheryl said, then swept past me like I was just an unnecessary folding chair in her upscale backyard soiree. She motioned to the DJ, who looked thoroughly confused. "Music back on, please. The vibe is dropping." And just like that, the music came back on. I stood in the middle of my own yard, next to my own pool being hijacked, holding a now watery glass of lemonade while yacht rock echoed across the patio, coming from my speakers, plugged in without permission. A middle-aged man in an unbuttoned shirt walked past, holding a bright red punch and flashing me a cheerful grin. "Great party. Cheryl really knows how to throw one." I didn't respond. I just nodded like a hotel concierge while mentally creating a list titled "People Who've Accidentally Become Extras in the HOA Tragedy." Cheryl stepped up to her stage, and by stage I mean a makeshift platform of 2 flipped-over ice coolers and a plywood plank covered in party tablecloth. Over her head hung a massive banner, "Welcome to Cheryl's Summer Splash Bash," with the voice of a retired yoga instructor now turned community politics hopeful. Cheryl spoke as if launching a city council campaign. "Thank you all for joining us today, HOA members. We're building a united community where everyone shares space, smiles, and unforgettable memories. This isn't just a party, it's a statement." Applause broke out. I nearly bit my cup in frustration. At that point, I decided to text Brian, the actual HOA president and the only one I remotely trusted. Here's how it went down. Me: "Brian, Cheryl is throwing a splash bash in my backyard." Brian: "In your yard?" Me: "Yep." DJ: "Security, a banner." Brian: "None of this is approved. I'll handle it. Just document everything." Me: "Already filming. Already. Taking pics. Anything else?" Brian: "If you can, stay calm. Don't shut off the pool filter like you did during the last unauthorized meeting." Me: "No promises." So I started filming, Cheryl grinning for photos, staff lining up shrimp skewers, a group of kids cannonballing into the pool, completely unaware that the owner of said pool was standing 5 meters away, deeply unimpressed. The scene hit peak absurdity when Cheryl declared, "We of the HOA are honored to be using this community-shared space and thank the generous support of our wonderful neighbor." I almost dropped my phone. "You just said I supported this party?" I asked, stepping forward, voice calm but firm. Cheryl looked at me, still smiling. "It's just a figure of speech, darling. No, I did not support anything. This is private property. I have the title. My home was built before the HOA even existed, and you're parading people through here like you booked a damn resort." Cheryl still smiled, but the corners of her mouth twitched ever so slightly. "Every neighborhood needs pioneers," she said, eyes gazing into the distance like she was delivering a stage monologue, "and if I must be the first to break down barriers to build community, then I'm ready." I went back inside and opened the drawer where I kept the property documents, thick stack, scanned and archived long ago. But now I pulled out the original hard copy. I walked back out and handed it to her. "Here's the property line. Here's proof that this house is not under HOA jurisdiction. Here's the county seal. Do you want community? Great. But don't. Try to build it in my yard without asking first." The guests started murmuring. A few set down their punch. The DJ looked uneasy. A woman whispered to her friend, "Is that true?" She said it was a shared space. Cheryl stepped back, exactly 5 steps, then straightened up and said loudly, "It seems a small misunderstanding has occurred. But instead of creating tension, let's all continue enjoying our afternoon. I'll handle this later." And then she smiled again, that smug little smirk, like she just won a debate inside her own imagination. I turned and walked away silently. But in my mind, a plan was forming. No shouting, no lawsuits, just a perfectly timed twist of a valve. I used to think the most annoying sound in the world was my alarm clock at 6 a.m. I was wrong. The most annoying sound is standing in your own backyard, your own property, while a complete stranger taps their glass and starts giving a speech, thanking people for using your shared pool. And yes, that pool, it's mine. A man in a loud Hawaiian shirt, wearing a fedora, was standing by my BBQ area, holding up a red punch and declaring with passion, "Let's have a big round of applause for Cheryl, the heart of this community, who has opened her heart and her pool so we can all have an unforgettable afternoon. Damn it." This wasn't in my forecast. Cheryl, still draped in her floral silk dress and oversized sun hat, was smiling gracefully like she'd just won the HOA Universe crown. A few neighborhood ladies elbowed each other and whispered how lovely Cheryl is. Kids were splashing around the pool, and I, the actual owner of all this, stood frozen, lemonade in one hand, property deed in the other. I was about to speak up, but wait. I looked around. None of these guests knew Cheryl had zero authority here. She hadn't asked permission, hadn't contacted the actual HOA, hadn't even bothered to say a word to me. An idea sparked. I walked slowly to the side gate. Two security guards, dressed in black shirts and wearing earpieces, were standing, alert, like they were off-duty FBI agents working weekends. They looked up at me cautiously. "Hello, sir," one of them said. "This is a private HOA event, correct? We were hired by Cheryl to keep the pool area secure. Avoid uninvited guests." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, excellent. Then let me show you who the real uninvited guest is." I pulled out my property deed, the kind of document the HOA once tried and failed to contest because my lot was built before the association was ever formed. I held it up right in their faces. "This is the official plat map. This land, including the pool, the yard, the outdoor bathroom, and yes, even the speaker setup, is private property. I am the sole legal owner. And Cheryl? She has absolutely no right to be here." The taller guard frowned. The other one looked toward the backyard, where Cheryl was taking selfies with guests and holding her punch like she'd just received an Emmy. "Yeah, something feels off now." "Exactly," I smiled. "And if you two don't want your names listed in a trespassing incident report, I suggest you step off the property ASAP." They both nodded instantly. One even muttered, "Thanks for not calling the cops." I walked back through the party, past a woman helping herself to her third shrimp skewer from my grill setup. I marched straight toward Cheryl. Cheryl, she turned, still wearing that smug grin. "Oh, there you are, finally joining the fun?" I pointed toward the yard. "Just here to announce, this is my property, and you are being formally warned for hosting an unauthorized event on private land." Cheryl waved dismissively, like swatting a fly. "Oh, don't make a fuss. We're just trying to build community spirit. If everyone were as selfish as you, this neighborhood would never thrive." I walked to the DJ table and grabbed the mech. My voice rang out across the backyard. "Sorry to interrupt. My name is Thomas, and I am the legal owner of this property, including the pool you're swimming in. This event was not approved. Cheryl does not have permission to host anything here, and she certainly doesn't have the right to use this space for HOA activities." I pulled out my phone and showed a text from Brian, the real HOA president. "Cheryl has no authorization for any event. Document everything." The air instantly dropped a few degrees. Phones came out, whispers. A few guests stood up. One young guy on a flamingo float shouted, "Wait! This isn't the clubhouse!" An older woman murmured, "Did Cheryl lie to us?" Cheryl snapped. "This is just a misunderstanding, I thought." "No, you didn't think so. You assumed." I cut her off. "And me? I haven't even started reacting yet. But don't worry. This party is about to wrap up. I turned toward the backyard shed, the one holding my ultimate weapon, a water valve, a backup valve, one twist. I knelt down and turned it a quarter inch. The water in the pool began to lower, quietly, slowly, but undeniably. There are moments in life you'll remember forever, not because they were glorious, but because they were too absurd to forget. For me, it was the moment I, as the legal homeowner, was told by two men in black shirts and Bluetooth earpieces that I should step out to the gate to discuss things privately. The DJ switched to some track that sounded like a toothpaste commercial, and Cheryl was shining, both figuratively and literally, as the mobile party lights bounced off. Her sequin dress. I said nothing. I just stood in a corner sipping my passion fruit lemonade and waited. But Cheryl couldn't tolerate anyone standing still without kneeling. She glided toward me, her dress fluttering behind her like a cheap perfume ad. "You should leave this area if your name isn't on the guest list," she said, voice sweet as poison. I smiled. "Oh, I'm not just on the list. I own the tax records." Her expression tightened like she'd just sipped pure lemon juice, but she didn't back down. "This is for the community. Don't let your personal pettiness ruin the spirit of connection. I've worked so hard to build." I looked around at Cheryl's community. A group of guys struggling to fix a toppled fake palm tree. A crying child who'd slipped on the wet patio. A woman lightly smacked the pool filter with her sandal because it's making too much noise. Cheryl's community, truly a masterpiece of chaos. "Don't let him ruin our party," Cheryl shouted like I was a witch at a Salem trial, and horrifyingly, a few people clapped. I saw them, those sipping pineapple punch while their minds were puppeted by Cheryl like characters in Get Out. I started recording videos, not for legal evidence, but so one day I could sit with friends and say, "You won't believe this. This is the exact moment she declared herself the spiritual representative of the neighborhood, seconds before being exposed as a trespasser." A man in a floral shirt, halfway through a sausage skewer, approached me cautiously. Are you really the homeowner?" he asked, almost whispering. "I'm the one who pays the water bill, the electric bill, and just replaced the toilet lid last week. What do you think?" He stepped back, eyes wide. "I thought this was the HOA area." "No," I said clearly. "This is a non-HOA zone, the only place where clipboards have no legal power." One by one, whispers started spreading. Small groups began murmuring. Cheryl was still shouting into her mic. "We will not back down. Anyone who doesn't support us is a threat to community spirit. Don't let one selfish individual sabotage what we've built together." But I knew the event wasn't approved. I knew the real HOA never gave permission. I had the text from Brian, the actual HOA president, who was already on his way. I knew Cheryl was staging her final act before the curtain crashed, and I waited. I walked toward the entrance, where the DJ assistant was starting to unplug the lights, muttering about a sketchy contract. I overheard an elderly woman on the phone with her daughter whispering, "I think I'm at the wrong place." And in that moment I knew Cheryl had bet all her fake credibility and was about to lose everything, just a few more minutes. And by then, I wouldn't need to lift a finger. I'd just stand there and watch the fabricated belief system of one master-level Karen collapse in front of neighbors, guests, and everyone she lured here with pineapple tarts and promises of community bonding. The late afternoon sky had turned a fiery orange-red, like the final curtain for a tragic comedy reaching its climax. After my glorious pool drain maneuver, Cheryl's illegal HOA bash, led by the self-declared queen of neighborhood harmony, had turned into a soggy war zone. Plastic cups floating like lost lifeboats, balloons dropping like exhausted soldiers, and Cheryl herself standing at the edge of the pool like a general whose troops had just mutinied. But I knew one thing for certain. Cheryl wasn't the type to admit defeat. No. She's the kind of person who, if the Titanic was sinking, would still stand at the bow shouting, "This ship belongs to the HOA!" After hours of twisting valves, twisting logic, and twisting the collective patience of everyone involved, I decided it was time to bring in a third party, someone with more authority to mop up this mess, and no one fits that description better than the local police. The same folks usually summoned here to deal with criminal-level hedge disputes fabricated by HOA gossip chains. I took out my phone and made a very simple call. "Hi, I'd like to report an unlawful gathering." No, not wildlife intrusion, more like rogue HOA infestation. 15 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up to the curb. Inside were two officers, one older, salt and pepper hair, name tag, Winslow. A man who's handled over 100 Karen uprisings in his career. And a rookie, fresh out of the academy, furiously scribbling notes like this was a live-action law exam. I met them at the gate. Officer Winslow stepped out first, squinting toward what was once my pool, but now resembled a drained battlefield. "Let me guess," he said. Deadpan. "Cheryl?" "Bingo," I replied. She called last time about leaves blowing into her yard, claimed it was biological trespassing. We made our way to the backyard. Cheryl was still attempting to salvage the event by negotiating with a few remaining guests, most of whom looked like they were silently planning to block her on Facebook. When she spotted the officers, Cheryl instantly snapped into victim mode, like a well-practiced stage cue. "Officers! I'm the organizer of this community event," she cried, pointing at me like I was the Grinch at a Christmas fair. "This man, he vandalized shared property, threatened my guests, and drained the pool while children were swimming. They almost drowned." I let out a dry chuckle. The pool was already down to the tiles. How do kids drown in 2 inches of regret? Officer Winslow raised a hand. "All right, let's all breathe. I'll need to see property ownership documents." Didn't have to tell me twice. I pulled a crisp copy of my deed from my back pocket, the same one I've kept handy ever since Cheryl started sticking passive-aggressive HOA flyers on my door, labeled unauthorized shrubbery. Winslow studied the papers, then turned to Cheryl. "Ma'am, according to these records, the pool lies entirely within private property. It's not subject to any HOA jurisdiction." Cheryl blanched. But like any HOA Karen worth her salt, she went full courtroom drama. "But I submitted a request to the board. They didn't deny it, so that means approval by default. It's HOA Code 18, Section 4, regarding events on community-adjacent spaces deemed reasonably harmonious." Winslow blinked at her like she'd just tried to interpret the U.S. Constitution using IKEA instructions. "And you believed reasonably harmonious meant hijacking someone's yard?" The rookie jotted that down, visibly struggling not to smirk. I chimed in. She also hired private security, slapped a HOA zone sign on my fence, tossed my personal items, and gave speeches like she's running for HOA president of the universe. Winslow sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Ms. Cheryl, by state law, unauthorized entry, illegal gathering, and use of personal property without consent is a violation. You have 2 options: leave and never come back, or I'll have to escort you out." The silence was instant. A few guests began tiptoeing away from the mess. Cheryl looked around for allies, but no one met her gaze. Maybe shame finally caught up with them. Then she dropped her clipboard, her holy symbol of HOA authority, onto the concrete like she was laying down arms. No yelling, no "I'll sue you all," just the soft, defeated echo of her heels as she walked away. Winslow turned to me. "Next time you throw a pool party, make sure I get an invite. But, a proper one." I grinned. "Only if they know whose house it is this time." The sound of Cheryl's heels walking away was the sweetest music I'd heard all day. But I wasn't celebrating just yet. Cheryl? She's not the kind to stay gone for long. And as for me, well, I was just getting started. I'd only turned the valve. Stay tuned. I had just finished washing my hands after cleaning up the aftermath of Cheryl's rogue pool party when the side gate rattled again. A familiar voice rang out, this time without the pretense of civility. We will not let you turn this community area into your personal kingdom. Cheryl's shrill voice, still reeking of sangria and imagined authority, echoed through the wooden fence. I sighed, grabbed my coffee, and sat back down on the cushioned chair by the pool, the same pool I had just drained like a purification ritual. Cheryl was standing on the other side of the fence with two strangers, one who looked like a self-taught HOA law expert and a woman clutching a stack of overstuffed files. She raised a stack of yellow papers, clearly printed from a neighborhood office supply store, and shouted, under Clause 47B of the Community Charter, any area with shared utility characteristics, such as a pool, belongs to collective ownership unless personalized certification is provided. I raised an eyebrow. Personalized certification? That was a brand new phrase, one I had never seen in any legal document, not even in those misaddressed HOA mailers I usually tossed straight into the recycling bin. Cheryl, I responded, trying not to laugh. This is a privately owned pool on private property. I've got the lot survey, the deed, the property tax filings, the real estate disclosure, and if you'd like, I can bring out the county-approved architectural schematics and 5 years' worth of maintenance receipts. Cheryl ignored me and whispered something to her backyard lawyer. The man stepped forward, adjusted his tucked-in polo shirt above his khaki shorts, and declared with theatrical flair, "We are considering filing a formal grievance with the HOA board over acts of public space seizure, refusal to share communal assets, and violations of neighborly spirit." I looked up to the sky. A soft breeze blew. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance, and I was ready. I went back into the house, opened my safe, and pulled out the In Case of Cheryl folder, a 3-inch thick binder I had prepared just for moments like this. Inside were a certified copy of the property deed, the most recent property tax statement explicitly confirming non-HOA status, a formal letter from the HOA verifying I was not a member, and, my personal favorite, an email from Brian, the actual HOA president, stating clearly, Cheryl does not have the authority to host events on any property outside designated public areas. I stepped back outside and laid the documents across the patio table like I was about to sign a multinational trade agreement. "Please review," I said with the poise I'd perfected after 3 seasons of binge-watching Law and Order. "All legal documentation is here. This pool is not under HOA jurisdiction. You hosted an unauthorized event, and if you continue to claim this is a community space, I'll be more than happy to let a real lawyer, not one wearing flip-flops, reach out." Cheryl went pale, but like every self-styled protagonist in an HOA tragicomedy, she didn't back down. "Fine," she snapped. "Then I'll call a vote within the HOA to designate this property as shared utility space. If the majority agrees, you won't have a choice." I frowned. "You're planning to rewrite the property lines with a vote? That's the spirit of community," Cheryl shouted. "That's also the fastest way to get arrested for fraud," I replied. Cheryl opened her mouth to argue again, but then my phone rang. It was Brian. "Hey," I answered. His voice was like a symphony. "At sunset, I heard Cheryl's at it again. This time she's invoking community spirit as legal grounds and trying to democratically override property boundaries. Give me 15 minutes. I hung up and turned to Cheryl with the calm confidence of a man who knows he's about to watch someone dig their own grave with a shovel they forged themselves. I used to think the most awkward experience in life was attending your ex's wedding. That was before I stood in the middle of my own backyard, commandeered as a community area, and watched a crowd slowly trickle out of Cheryl's party, as if they'd just realized they were guests at the wedding of an ex they never even dated. The atmosphere dissolved without warning. Half-empty punch cups were left abandoned on tables. Neon-colored cupcakes bearing, "Thank you, Cheryl," toppled across the patio like fallen soldiers. And Cheryl, still perched at the edge of the pool, blonde ponytail held high like a general refusing to concede, was scrambling to reframe her failure with the energy of a war queen who hadn't accepted defeat. I leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed, sipping my now watery passion fruit lemonade, silently observing the quiet implosion of the party. Over the faint hum of yacht rock, a classy choice by Cheryl, the sounds of confusion started bubbling up. Wait, I thought this was the HOA clubhouse. Didn't Cheryl say this place belonged to the community? Whose house is this anyway? Why is the party so loud? I simply pointed toward the newly planted sign fluttering near the gate, which I'd set up minutes earlier. Private pool. Not HOA property. Trespassers will be Drainita woman with short hair and oversized sunglasses awkwardly pulled her kid out of the pool, muttering something about no one ever checked if this event was actually permitted. A middle-aged couple lingered by the buffet table, holding plates of now-cold sausage skewers, wearing the same expression as people who just realized they'd walked into a timeshare seminar. But the true climax of this uninvited farewell came when Brian, the real president of the HOA, showed up. He entered the yard with a look that was equal parts exhaustion and disbelief. Beside him was a uniformed police officer, not too stern but serious enough to send a shiver down the remaining community spirit clingers-on. Cheryl rushed over, voice sharp and frantic, just as you'd expect. "You're here. Thank God! I'm being obstructed from hosting a legitimate HOA event!" Brian didn't even answer. He simply gestured toward me. "This is the homeowner, and he's not a member of the HOA. I smiled and handed over a notarized copy of my property declaration with the lot clearly outlined in red. The officer glanced over it, nodded, then turned to Cheryl. "Ma'am, you are currently standing on private property not authorized for public use. If the homeowner wishes, you could be charged with trespassing. If looks could kill, I would have been reduced to ashes right then and there." Cheryl stared at me like she was trying to send the emotional damage of every childhood trauma she'd ever had, especially the one where she didn't get picked as class president, straight through my skull. "I was trying to build community." "On someone else's lawn?" I replied, keeping my tone calm. "No invite, no greeting, and you tried to kick me out of my own house?" "This isn't over," Cheryl hissed. The officer scribbled something in his notebook. Brian sighed audibly. The guests scattered further, like pigeons sensing a firecracker. One even snapped a photo of my warning sign, probably destined for Reddit. I turned toward the porch, but before I could move, Cheryl stepped into my path. Clutching her clipboard like it was a holy relic, she shouted, "Who here supports me continuing this party? Who wants to preserve community pool access?" Not a single hand went up. A small boy, mid-bite into a cupcake, let out a sigh and mumbled, "I thought this was your house, mister." Cheryl froze. And in that moment, for the first time all day, she realized she was solo starring in a play no one else wanted to see. The officer pulled out a formal warning slip, handed it to Cheryl for signature, acknowledging her verbal propaganda, and receiving her final caution. Brian quietly escorted her off the property. I walked to the gate and closed it, gently without even locking it, because I knew none of them would be back. The party was over, but my smile, fully intact. I thought everything would end after Cheryl, aka the former self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, left my backyard with her deflated clipboard. But no. For people like Cheryl, public defeat isn't the end. It's merely the prelude to the online drama arc. The next morning, just as I brewed my first cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch to enjoy some long-overdue peace, my phone buzzed non-stop. 12 messages, 3 missed calls, and 1 screenshot with a bold headline from the local neighborhood group, Neighbors United, Serenity Lakes Community Chat. Urgent, HOA conflict, homeowner uses violence and hostility against community. Organizer profile photo, Cheryl. Username, Ho Cheryl Real, because apparently fake Cheryl got banned. Her post read like an ancient war scroll full of righteous buzzwords: bullying, lawlessness, community in danger, and a hostile individual disrespecting neighborhood norms. According to Cheryl, I, the homeowner, had threatened, evicted, destroyed community property, and even deliberately drained the pool to incite panic. She called me the water warlord. Yes, I had to reread it to realize she was comparing me to a warlord of plumbing. I hadn't even finished laughing when the comment section began turning on her. Wait, isn't that property not part of the HOA? Cheryl said that was the new clubhouse. Pretty sure I saw the owner showing property documents yesterday. And then the video dropped. No idea who filmed it, but clearly someone at the party had captured the glorious moment when Cheryl was mid-toast, lifting her cup with grandeur, just as the pool started draining, floats tilting sideways, a guest yelling, why can I see the bottom?" The clip ended with me holding my passion fruit lemonade, arms folded, grinning like I'd just dropped the mic in a rap battle. Caption: Karen gets drained. Literally tags: Ho drama, Karen pool takeover. Drain the queen. I nearly spit my coffee from laughing. But it didn't. Stop there. Then the HOA council chimed in. That afternoon, I got a call from Brian, the actual president of the HOA, who at this point had basically become my drama hotline. "Have you seen the video?" 3 times. I laughed every time. "We're holding an emergency meeting. Cheryl's threatening to sue the entire HOA. I nearly dropped my phone. Apparently, Cheryl had sent an anonymous letter, signed with her full name, of course, accusing the HOA of collusion, damaging her reputation as an event organizer, and siding with enemies of the community, aka me. Oh, and she attached a map of the neighborhood, hand-drawn with my property lot, highlighted in bright red and labeled Danger Zone, Non-Compliant Hostile. Brian sent me a scan. I printed it, framed it, and hung it in my bathroom for display and emergency hand-drying. Then the neighborhood witnesses started speaking out. What Cheryl forgot was she lived in the internet era, an elderly woman from down the street, someone Cheryl had once shamed for planting flowers in incompatible colors, posted about how Cheryl tried to have her rosebush chopped down for violating community visual harmony. Another family posted audio of Cheryl yelling into their Ring doorbell at 6 a.m. on a Saturday because their trash bin was tilted at a hazardous angle. Keyboard warriors in the community dug up old group chat logs, revealing past cases of Cheryl making up rules, abusing her clipboard powers, and self-publishing HOA newsletters using Comic Sans font. These were compiled into a post titled The Cheryl Chronicles, From Clipboard to Chaos. The climax, the vote for her removal by evening, I received an email. Emergency meeting notice. Motion to revoke Cheryl P.'s event authority within the HOA. The meeting was held on Zoom. I didn't need to attend, because residents live-streamed the whole thing in the neighborhood Facebook group. The screen looked like a courtroom reality show. Cheryl, still trying to channel her inner Cho goddess, sat in front of a "Who cares, together we build" sign. But this time, no one was buying front-row tickets to her solo act. Brian stated calmly, "We've confirmed. The property where Cheryl hosted the event is privately owned. Misuse of space, misinformation, and public disruption constitute serious violations." One council member, who Cheryl once forced to repaint her house number for non-standard font, raised her hand. "I motion to revoke Cheryl's right to organize any future HOA events indefinitely." Everyone on Zoom nodded. It was procedural, unanimous. Me? I just watched fireworks. That night I sat out on the porch. The breeze was cool, sky clear, pool freshly refilled. I placed a new passion fruit lemonade on the table, this one drama-free, and pulled out my phone. The yacht rock playlist was still playing, the same Cheryl once curated for her elevated social gatherings. Under the live stream, the comments read, "Finally, the HOA belongs to the people again. We should build a statue of that guy by the pool. Cheryl is officially a legend of the worst kind." I took a sip, smiled. The best part? I didn't do anything. Just a guy kicked out of his own pool and let the internet do the rest. Just 1 week after the great Cheryl debacle TM, my neighborhood felt reborn. It was quiet, peaceful, no honking, no laminated name tags zip-tied to my gate, no clipboards, no one photographed my daisies to file HOA compliance reports. And me? I was setting up my own cookout. This time it was a real party, with real invited guests, on real property I actually owned, and with one single noble purpose: to celebrate freedom. Post Cheryl. I called it Freedom Grill Bash. No neon lights, no HOA banners taped to patio chairs, no RSVP cards printed in gold foil, just one simple wooden sign, posted near. My gate, carefully carved. Private yard, Karen-free zone, trespassers will be drained. The word Karen was carved at an angle, painted bright red and bordered with, yes, a deflated flamingo float. I set up the tables and chairs again, lit some soft paper lanterns, and refilled the pool with fresh water. Clean, sparkling, serene. Like it had never witnessed a hostile takeover by someone wielding HOA statutes like a battle axe. I queued up an 80s yacht rock playlist, the same genre Cheryl used to blast. But this time the music wasn't just background noise. It was the soundtrack of poetic justice. The first to arrive were the Ramirez family, the couple next door once scolded by Cheryl for letting bougainvillea petals fall onto public sidewalks. They brought chilled agua fresca and a bowl of Mexican salad. This time, we brought lemonade, without a clipboard, they joked. Then came old Hank, our famously grumpy neighbor who never attended anything. But today he showed up with a can of beer and a Bluetooth speaker. "I heard this one's a Cheryl-free party. Count me in," he declared like a man reclaiming his independence. One by one, families strolled through my gate, smiling, unbothered. No one asked for names. No one took photos of license plates. The only unspoken rule: no shirts with the word HOA, and absolutely no printed copies of Code 47B. The party bloomed with laughter, sizzling grill sounds, splashing kids in the pool, and, most importantly, not a single clipboard lurking in sight. At one point, we played the legendary video, the one where Cheryl stood in the middle of the pool, grimacing like she was being exorcised, while the water drained around her feet in glorious Hollywood. Slow-mo. Everyone erupted in laughter. A little girl faked a fall into the water and yelled, "Oh no! The water's draining! Cheryl, save me!" Someone stealthily slapped a sticker on my fridge. "Next time, send Cheryl an invite, so she knows not to come." A couple from the end of the block gifted me something truly special. A small carved wooden statue of a short-haired woman clutching a clipboard mid-fall into a drain pipe. I placed it beside the pool valve, an honorary memorial to the age of Cheryl. And just when the party was peaking, music, laughter, grilled hot dogs in the air, a familiar SUV gilded silently past my gate. Cheryl, no sunglasses, no clipboard. Just that pale, overexposed cream cheese look on her face, briefly caught in the string lights by the fence. She didn't stop. She didn't accelerate either. She just looked, but her stare, it no longer held defiance. It was the broken glass gaze of someone who'd lost her backyard coup. I raised my lemonade to the crowd and said, "Amazing what a little piece can do," all thanks to one simple sign with 3 words, Karen, free, zone. Laughter echoed, not, mocking, but relieved. A release. No one feared the HOA anymore. No one flinched at the sight of a clipboard. And absolutely no one wanted to receive an invitation with the phrase, "Event hosted by Cheryl." By 10 p.m., the lights dimmed, the last drinks were cleared, and as people headed home, one kid whispered to me, "Hey, mister, can you do this again next year? A Karen-free splash bash?" I smiled and nodded. Absolutely. But next time we add a remote control pool drain switch, just in case. The next morning, as I stepped out into my backyard with a steaming cup of coffee, the silence was almost surreal. No DJ blaring, no Cheryl shrieking, no burnt grill smoke or unfamiliar guests loitering around my pool. Just me, the birds chirping, and the still surface of the water, for the first time since the summer splash disaster. Cheryl, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, was no longer looming behind the fence with her sacred clipboard. The "Welcome to Cheryl's Summer Bash" banner had blown into a corner of the yard, crumpled and forgotten like her HOA career. I took a slow sip and glanced toward her front yard. A moving truck had backed into her driveway. She was moving out. No goodbyes, no farewell party, no speech like the one where she thanked herself for sacrificing so much for the community. Just two movers, a few worn-out cardboard boxes, and Cheryl, wearing a gray tracksuit, no sunglasses, no lipstick, no authority. She stood there like a shadow of the past. I didn't nod. I didn't wave. I simply stood still, like a protagonist at the end of a film, watching the villain exit stage left. Around noon, Brian, the actual HOA president, dropped by with a stack of documents, complete with the bold red seal of the community council. Among them was a very special notice, official confirmation. The property at my house number is not under the jurisdiction or authority of the HOA. Any unauthorized interference or event hosted on said property constitutes civil trespass and may result in prosecution. I flipped to the back. There was a still frame from the viral video. Cheryl standing by the pool, mid-shout, pointing at me as the caption read, "The moment her self-appointed HOA empire began to crumble." I laughed out loud. Brian scratched his head and said, "Honestly, I've never seen a counter-strike like that. You didn't just reclaim your space, you helped the whole neighborhood breathe again." I thanked him, then walked back to my pool, once the scene of my expulsion from my own backyard. Now, it had become a symbol of boundaries, of ownership, of how far someone will go when delusions of authority meet a locked valve. That evening, as golden sunlight rippled across the freshly refilled pool, I hosted a small gathering, the Karen-free zone celebration, just close neighbors, old friends, some mellow music, definitely not yacht rock, and one pristine new sign hanging by the entrance. Private pool. Trespassers will be drained. Illustrated, of course, with a flattened flamingo float. An old woman from the far end of the street leaned over and whispered, "You know, Cheryl, once made me take down my clothesline because it disrupted the community aesthetic. Today I brought 2 clothespins. And no t-shirt." We laughed until we cried. There were no speeches, no declarations, just shared glances of relief and long overdue peace. Another neighbor brought me a brand new float, shaped like a shark. They named it Cheryl. And then, around 9 p.m., that familiar silver SUV crept past my gate. Cheryl sat in the passenger seat. No sunglasses, no clipboard, no yelling, no live stream. Just a woman quietly leaving the stage she once thought belonged to her. She never looked over. She never came back. The following week, the newly elected HOA board mailed apology letters to every household. Enclosed was a new pamphlet, Understanding HOA Boundaries and the Limits of Community Power. Cheryl's story became neighborhood legend. I went back to my regular life. But every time I passed that house, the one that once served as the clipboard fortress of Cheryl, I couldn't help but smile. Because there it was, still standing. The small wooden sign I nailed into the fence with my own hands. Karen-free zone, since 2025. No shouting. No lawsuits, no chairs thrown, just a valve, a plan, and a glass of lemonade. And of course, a neighbor who refused to leave his backyard. The parties still happen. The guests still come and go. And Cheryl? She learned something that day. If you're going to play queen, make sure the throne isn't built over someone else's drain pipe.